Hey, it's a great pleasure to have a chat to you, James. James Croke. Hello.
Hi, nice to meet you, man.
Thank you very much. You made a movie called Latency. I'm going to talk all about that behind the scenes, so feel free to give me any cool stories you might have. But first of all, latency is not a commonly used word. How did you come up with the title?
Well, I liked it for the title because for sort of two reasons, because it has a double meaning, especially in the context of the film. So latency is a term used in computing and has sometimes there's a few different uses, but often has to do with the delay between a human interacting with the computer and the computer actually doing its command. So the time it takes you to think to hit the key on the keyboard, send the signal through your brain to your hand, and the hand hits the key, and the key sends a message to the computer to actually do it. There's latency in that. And that's often what engineering people working on computers, especially for gaming, are trying to sort of eradicate. And so the device in the film is sort of all about that.
Mm.
But then, of course, with the main character, Hannah, she has latency in that the something having the state of latency means it has potential. So there's something inactive but has the potential to act, and that's the sort of key of the story, and Hannah, specifically Hannah's story, and why
Yeah.
everything goes the way it does.
Yeah, I mean, I can put a spoiler alert at the beginning of this, and just we can talk spoilers, but that's basically describing a plot point. There's
Yeah,
something dormant that's about to come out of Hannah.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Are you a gamer? Are you just interested in games? Are you a tech head, or is it because you're the writer, director? So did you write it because of what you know, or is it just something that interests you, or are you just a gamer from way back?
Yeah, I mean, I've always played games, and there was a while there where I actually worked for a company that made games for mobile phones. This was pre smartphone. So I my job was the design, so I just had to make it look pretty, but everybody else had to make it actually work. But
Yeah.
there was some people who worked at that company whose job it was to test the games, and that was one of the sort of little ideas that sort of helped create the character of Hannah, and that's her job, is she's a games tester, and it allows her to not leave her house because she's agoraphobic,
Mm.
and that's a good income for her as a skilled professional gamer. So I just thought that was the coolest job in the world when I worked at that gaming place, and just be paid to play computer games all day, so
Yeah.
even if they were just on a mobile phone in that case. But yeah, I've wasted many hours playing games myself.
Well, I did notice the Miss Pac-Man and the Pac-Man lights in the background at a
Mhm.
couple of different stages. Were they set pieces, or were they your own personal collection?
That art department brought those to set.
Right.
There were a lot gamers, games and gamers, people make games, love Easter eggs, and there's a lot of Easter eggs sort of dotted throughout the film in the
Yeah.
art department dressing. Some of it's stuff that I contributed myself, and some of it is the crew, little hidden Easter eggs dotted throughout, which is sort of a fun little thing. I come from a background in production design, so
Okay.
um, and sort of knowing how to drop those things into the background has sort of
Yeah.
been something that I've always enjoyed. So this film, the premise of this film, sort of warrants it.
Well, yeah, it's a one location film
Mhm.
practically. I mean, there's a hallway, there's a roof eventually we see, but 90, I would say 90% of the movies in one room. Was it a set? Was it a room for rent that you hired in, like you filmed in, or
Oh,
what was the scenario there?
yeah. Well, when I wrote it, I had no idea how I was going to get the funding up, and so it was definitely possibly going to be a house that I rented and sort of made to look like an apartment.
Yeah.
But then I was lucky enough to sort of get it up and running. We ended up shooting it in Bangkok. It's not set in Bangkok, but that's where we
Yeah.
filmed.
Yeah.
And so it was a studio set. So the entire apartment is a studio set, and some of the hallway.
Yeah.
And the hallway that we had in set also was designed to match a location that we also shot at.
Okay.
So yeah, as you rightly say, about 95% of the film is set inside this one apartment.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of low light levels as well, and very little natural light. To
Yes.
me, that I'm not a gamer, but that's sort of almost what gamers would be, their environment would be, like light, dim lights, no
Yeah.
windows open. So that
Too much
seems,
light gets on your screen, and you don't want to prevent yourself from seeing what's on the monitor. So you
yeah,
block
yeah.
what's
Uh,
it's
because
Hannah's world, and she uh she's shutting out the outside world as well.
Yeah, I liked Hannah. I liked the character. Talk a little bit more about that shortly, about the
Mm.
cast, the minimal cast. But I noticed a Lionsgate logo at the start. Now
Mm.
there was a couple other logos, of course, and funding can come from anywhere. But honestly, that they're a big company. How did they come on board? Did you have to pitch to them? Like, how did you get the film made? To begin with.
Yeah, I was very lucky in that they came in very early on into
Okay.
the process. The producers, the producers I had immediate contact with, had talked to me previously about making the film, and in the interim, they had made a film that had been distributed by Lionsgate. So
Yeah.
Lionsgate, turned to them and said, "What do you got next?" And they said, "Well, we've got this little film you could do." And they jumped on board, and that sort of so I was very lucky to have them up front, having that sort of security blanket of a
Yeah.
rather large production company willing to distribute it. They were the distributors in North America.
Okay. Was it a three picture deal for you?
No, if only, yeah,
Hey, that's down the track. Well, we'll manifest
yeah,
it
maybe.
together. Uh, Now, there's a few characters that you don't even see. You
Mm.
hear voices only, or they're distorted when you do see them.
Yeah.
Did you cameo any voices, or did you have to voice cast, or was that AI?
So no, definitely no AI.
Good.
And so yeah, we were shooting in Bangkok, and so a lot of the time, the other voice was just read from the script by
Okay.
my translator, and which is pretty actually quite a difficult task for both the translator and for the cast having to imagine that same voice is multiple characters. Um, uh, and at times I read, but you never hear either his or my voice in the film. And then once we got to post-production, we did all the sound design. Post-production was done in Australia and Sydney.
Yeah.
And so we cast Australian actors, most of them doing American accents, but Australian actors to do the voices for all the off-screen characters.
I think one of them was used, our Australian accent, right? Was it the female, the one that she communicates with, or am I imagining that? It just seemed like it was a bit more British or Australian.
Yeah. So the Omnia, you mean the
Yeah,
voice
that's the
of
one.
the
Yeah, I wasn't
program?
sure her
Yeah.
name.
Yes, that's Chloe Schwank. She's an Australian actor,
Okay.
and she's a voiceover artist as well as an actor. So she has
Yeah.
a very crisp, perfect voice for that sort of role. And I'd actually sort of my headphones, like my Sennheiser headphones, when I turn them on, they tell me that power is on, and I just wanted a voice that had a similar sort of
Yeah.
tone to it, and and Chloe brought that.
Very cool. Yeah, no, I really liked the sound design and some of the voices in this. I was watching it myself in headphones, so I really appreciated that at times. There was a bit of body horror in it. Anytime you use like blood and around the gums and the teeth, I mean, that can be pretty unnerving for people.
Yeah.
Did you ever want to go a bit further with that, or was just that little bit that you sort of showed enough?
Yeah, I mean, I I don't know if you have, but I know a lot of people, and I have too, experienced sort of nightmares where you feel like your teeth are falling out.
I
And
don't think I have. I've heard of that, but I
yeah,
don't think
it's
I've had that dream.
well, you're doing well. I'd avoid it if I were you. It's absolutely terrible.
All
But
right.
so I wanted something sort of similar visually, as visceral as that. But uh, there was actually an R-rated version of the film completed, um,
Okay.
but Lionsgate decided to release a PG-13. It's PG-13 in the States. It's here. It's M. But yeah, so it's there were some other slightly more gory effects. Not that much actually. There's a very fine line between PG 13 and R in the American rating system. So
Yeah.
that's also why there's not as much swearing as there was in the original script.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, there wasn't much at all. And I did notice that because I think a lot of unnecessary swearing can take you out of the movie sometimes, unless it's for a reason.
Yeah. Well, she's also on her own. She's not, she spends most of the film by herself. So there's not heaps of dialogue
No.
because unless you're mad and you talk to yourself, that's, she mutters to herself now and then and things, but
Yeah.
she really needs, I'm not a big fan of dialogue that sort of goes, gee, I wonder what's down the hallway when,
Mm, mm.
they're by themselves.
When you were writing it, were you like over time, had it changed? Did it evolve, or was it what ended up on screen? If besides cutting it down a little bit in
Mm.
classification, was did what ended up on screen exactly what you wanted, or basically?
Uh, I think most filmmakers would be lying if they said it's exactly what they wrote. Some for good and some for bad. So, for
Yeah.
example, the I was able to I should say, the team was able to achieve a lot more in VFX than I had initially anticipated.
Okay.
So a lot of once I realized that we could do that, I sort of wrote it up to the VFX level that we thought that we could pull off. So the flip side of that was, it got very ambitious, and so some shots and some sequences had to be dropped because we were not able to pull them off. Plus, we also had a very tight 16-day shoot, which is absolutely nothing. Um,
No.
when I when I first calculated it myself of how many days I thought we'd need, I thought 30. So we had sort of half the number of days that I thought we might need. And so it's a challenge, and I think the nature of filmmaking is compromise. You sort of have to be okay with that, and sometimes the compromises are out of your control, and then sometimes you have a choice to make, and often that's the sort of crux of it when you're directing something, is you've got to weigh up the two compromises that you're faced with and choose what's best for the film. So yeah,
Mm.
there's a bunch of stuff on the cutting room floor. There's a bunch
Mm.
of stuff that was never shot, and that's just the nature of making films, I think.
Yeah, yeah, no, I understand that, but that's interesting to know there's a bit on the cutting room floor.
Mm.
You might get a chance to put it all back in one day.
The director's cut, yeah.
Yeah, who knows? I'll be up for that. So I would assume in that 16 days shoot, you probably got very little sleep, and your stress levels were high, I guess, as a director should be, I guess, most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, it was despite the fact that it was very, stressful and time poor, let's say. Um,
Mm,
the Bangkok crew were absolutely lovely team, and they sort of welcomed me with open arms and invited me into their family, basically, and many of them were family. And
yeah,
I'd never personally even been to Bangkok before, let alone worked with any of the crew. So before arriving there, I hadn't even met a single member of the crew.
yeah,
Um, and so I was just going in very blind to that production. And it took a bit of back and forth, sort of learning how we work. But by the end of it, it was all a lot of smiles and fun, and certainly the best catering I'd ever had in my entire life on a film set. I love top
Okay.
food, so I was set.
So craft services catering, it wasn't just game of food,
No,
packets of chips and lollies. You had
no,
some good food.
yeah,
Lots of Red Bull. I saw that in
yeah.
the fridge.
Yeah. Red Bull were nice enough to back us by supplying all the Red Bull.
I
Um,
thought that might have been the case.
yeah, but the sweetness of that on set did get quite overpowering at times.
Mm.
So when you went out to have lunch and have a savory meal, it was much appreciated.
Was there a reason the apartment for Hannah was 707?
Uh, well, uh, yeah. I mean, I love Finch's Seven,
Well,
and
who doesn't? Of
yeah,
course, masterpiece.
yeah, and I just wanted to have a little sort of nod to that, and 101 was a bit too
Okay.
much. In that film, there's a 404, so I thought I would step it up to 7.
Yep. Yep.
Plus, for the ending, I needed to be on a relatively high floor of the apartment.
It's because of seven now. Every movie I see that when they're sitting in a cafe, I have a look to see if it's called the Quality Cafe. Because in seven, they're sitting in the Quality Cafe, and that cafe pops up in like random movies all the
Yes.
time. It's a set, but it's called the Quality Cafe. So
Yeah,
I love Seven, one of the great films.
it is. Sure is.
The other thing I wanted to ask you if this was on purpose, but the yellow shoes that
Mm.
Hannah puts on, and then the big yellow coat. Was
Mhm.
there a reason it was yellow and
Yes.
anything there? Yep.
Yeah. So the color palette of the whole film is sort of very carefully designed,
Yep.
and yellow is sort of this popping color that just comes up now and then, but it's not throughout the whole film. And for me,
Yep.
yellow was in this film was the color of freedom. So that there's flashbacks to a pet canary when she was a kid, and it's yellow, and she released it from its cage, and
Mm.
so when she's given her the gift of these sneakers from Jen, the that it's Jen encouraging her to leave the apartment and find her freedom from this past. So they are naturally yellow, and then when she sort of pulls herself together and says, "Right, that's it, I'm getting out of here," she throws
Yeah.
on the yellow hoodie as well. And there's also some other sort of flashback moments where she spends time with her father, and then you'll note that she has a yellow raincoat on in that sequence, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
because that was the last time she felt sort of true freedom was when her father was around and playing with her father in the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
You've got to really pay attention to your movie. I don't think it's one of those ones you can pause and go make a coffee and come back.
Mm.
I do believe you got to pay attention because you've got a lot happening between the lines.
Thank you. That's one of the greatest compliments I've received.
Oh,
It's
I was just observing because I'd seen the movie twice now, just I love to watch everything twice,
mm,
and yeah, you got to read between the lines a lot.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, even on set with the crew, some of the crew were like, "Whoa, you're demanding a lot of the audience right now, James." And
Okay.
and uh and I think that's good. I mean, I as an audience member, as a viewer of films, I like to be challenged. I like to have to discover the film as it plays out, and I like to have to be observant. And doesn't mean I understand absolutely everything I ever watch, but
Yeah.
it's I like it when I get to discover things, and if I get to rewatch a film, see more and each time, and so I hope that people sort of have that same experience with latency, because that's what I enjoy, and for me sort of the standard of making those decisions on set as director and writing it as well
Yeah.
is, would I enjoy this? If I'm my own target audience, would I
Yeah.
would I enjoy watching this? And I think I would like the challenge of watching Latency. I don't want I don't need everything handed to me on a silver plate.
No, no, it's good to hear that you're looking at going outside the box with your filmmaking. It's good to hear, and I hope that doesn't change.
Thank you. Yeah.
Now, what I've been hanging to ask you, Sasha Luss. I watched her in Shiro's. I thought that was quite funny and underrated. Anna, of course,
Mhm.
and other stuff that I've seen her in small roles. How did you cast her? Did you know her? She's definitely the right person for Hannah, but is there a reason behind the casting?
I was just lucky enough to be introduced to her via the producers who had worked with her before.
Yep.
One of the producers actually had made Shiro's, which was shot in Thailand.
Yeah, I've seen it and it's okay. Like it's a fun movie.
So he was able to sort of set up that meeting for me,
Right.
and uh, yeah, when I'd always sort of admired her from Anna, especially.
Yeah.
Uh, I I was very open to, someone like Sasha playing that role. And then when we met, very similar to this, just over Zoom for the first time, um, she was in the process of reading one of my favorite books of all time, and we just hit it off on that sort of front. And I just knew, I was like, yep, she can nail this role. And Sasha did. She just threw herself at this role, and she didn't have much prep time and didn't have much time actually on set, which sort of added to the immediacy of, I think, of a lot of the scenes. And she's a like incredibly intelligent person, and she would grill me with questions and
That's
trying to
good.
get to the core of the character Hannah. And um, and uh, we got to a point where I just had a lot of trust in her, so I knew that I could sort of give her some guidance, and she would deliver Hannah to the screen. And yeah, it was one of the sort of great pleasures of the whole shoot was working with Sasha.
Yeah. One of the great pleasures of watching movies is watching people like Sasha, not
Mm,
just because of the sculptured looks and she's lovely to look at, but the
mm,
determination and the individuality of the performance. She's
mm.
acting solitary pretty much the whole movie, besides a few scene partners. But were there anything what instructions did you have to give her, or were there any ticks that she had of her own for the role?
I mean, she'd done her own sort of, she'd done some research as well, like talking to some doctors about agoraphobia,
Yeah, okay.
to get sort of guidance on that, and how heavy or to play certain scenes. Um, because sometimes sort of an agoraphobic character can become a little bit of a stereotype of that condition. And
Mm.
Sasha did not want to do that, and so she had done her research and sort of brought a lot of that to it. Sasha's not a gamer, so we spent a bit of time talking about how to move her fingers on a keyboard and be purely practical stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, probably one of the, like as you said, she's a stunning person to look at, and one of the hardest things was that she's meant to look pretty rough by the end of the film, and that was probably one of the one of the greatest challenges we had was, even with the terrible, looking rough makeup, she still shone through. That you suffer
Yeah.
through that.
Yeah, I concur to that. And it's funny you say about the hand movements of the controls because that's a big deal. I'm no gamer, as I said, and I
Mm.
wouldn't know if it looked correct or not. So that's good that you made a point of getting that right, or she did.
Yeah. Well, luckily there was actually quite a couple. There was a handful of gamers actually in the crew,
Of course.
and so yeah, sometimes they'd be like, "Don't hit that key, hit that key." So they couldn't keep their mouth shut anyway. So we would sort of coaching little bits along the way, and I'd sent her a
Cool.
whole bunch of videos of pro gamers and little documentaries about pro gamers and how there's even different ways of how they place the keyboard on the table and different angles they hold the mouse at. So I'd sent her a bunch of those things as well, just so she could sort of get that world in her head. Um,
That's method acting for an indie film, which doesn't always happen.
that's
Almost.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Um, but, sorry, go on.
What about Alexis Ren? I mean, a smaller role, but I've seen her in a few things as well,
Mm.
including Landman, which is a current show on at the moment.
Yes.
Billy Bob Thornton just got nominated for a Golden Globe for it. And
Yep.
I've seen about 4 or 5 episodes so far. And she was in The Enforcer too, a year or so ago, which was also directed by an Australian as well.
Yeah. 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 We, I've sort of first met Alexis again, via Zoom, and
Yep.
I personally didn't know much about her. I'm not a crazy user of Instagram, and don't follow Dancing with the Stars or anything like that. Those things that she's been on. Um,
Okay.
but she really responded to this screenplay, and when it had been sent to her, and so we had a really great chat. And what I was really looking for for that role was a best friend,
Yeah.
and someone who is, a genuinely kind, caring person who would go to the lengths that Jen goes to. And Alexis is a great friend, to all her friends, and um, uh, she's anyone who has her as a friend is a very lucky person, and that's what I wanted to sort of have sort of naturally exude from that character, because she's
Yep.
not on screen that much.
No.
So it had to be sort of an instant effect. Uh,
Yeah.
and that character had gone through sort of multiple iterations in the screenplay,
Okay.
and I'd sort of, some of it had been modeled off some of my own friends, and I don't have any friends like Alexis, so not, not trying to insult my own friends, but uh, uh, so uh, so when I met her, we even readjusted the script again after I'd met her.
Yeah, well, I found Alexis' character fit her as well perfectly because she was almost like chalk and cheese. They were
Hmm.
different. She was more upbeat, jumping around, talking louder,
Yeah.
and running around the apartment, whereas Hannah, not always, but she just sat sort of in certain spots most of the time,
Mm.
didn't do
Yeah.
as much pacing. It
Yeah.
was a really good dynamic between the pair.
Great. That's good because, well, Jen is Hannah's link to the outside world.
Yeah,
Physical link to the outside world. Literally brings her food, and uh, takes her rubbish out, um,
yeah,
and that was, you know, and I wanted, I think good friends are not identical to each other. There's often the sort of quiet one, and then there's the loud, sort of vivacious one, and that's certainly Jen. Yeah.
well, I don't know if you ever had an alternate ending in mind, but I kept thinking she was going to wake up. That there was no one in the bath. Jen wasn't in the bath, and Hannah was going to wake up, and the cops weren't at the door. That wasn't the case. I thought it was just going to be a fever dream or something through malnutrition and no sunlight.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that would still be a very valid ending.
Yeah,
The Yeah, the end is pretty much as it was always written. There was a couple of little moments and scenes leading up to the end that, for
yeah,
different reasons, needed to be cut. Um, uh, but yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of bleak endings. I don't need everything to be happy. And it's I actually the Jen in the bath is one of the scenes that it was that was a very tricky shot because it's all one take.
Yeah.
But where it transforms from the sort of real world to the present world. But that was actually one of the shots that was a tipping point between PG and R.
Yeah.
So the Jen in the bath you saw was a much more muted version of the her demise, I would say.
You can get away with a lot in darkness. Not that she was in complete darkness, but it was a dark sort of scene. So
Yeah.
it wasn't all bright red or anything, the water. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's
So
I know you said you'd give spoilers, so
yeah.
warnings. In the R-rated version, when Hannah touches her face, her whole face peels off. So,
Okay.
rather horrific way. If I had my way, I would have argued with the ratings people that actually be fine for PG, but I've seen there's a Marvel film where a guy gets his entire face ripped off by a raccoon and talks to the camera, and that's fine to be PG. But
Yeah, don't get me started on Marvel. Not a fan, but they are what they are. But I think they're on the classification board. Look at them differently because they're comic book kind of related. Maybe
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I guess it's funny when a raccoon rips your face off.
Not in my world, but that's another story. Why a director? I mean, you said you were doing a lot of production, or you've done your backgrounds in production design and so forth. Why are you in the filmmaking industry? Is that something you wanted to do when you were growing up? Is it something you fell into?
Yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to do it. In the early part of my life and career, I actually was working in theatre. I was doing set and costume design.
Oh yeah,
And then I sort of became a little bit more honest with myself and decided to go back to the film, which is what had sort of kicked off the interest in the first place.
yeah,
And then after a while working as a production designer, doing building designing sets and stuff, I found I got a bit frustrated with the scripts that I was being sent to design, and I didn't find them particularly interesting. And so
okay,
instead of complaining about it, I thought I'd better put my money where my mouth was and put pen to paper. And it's been a long journey. So to get here, a lot of false starts and hiccups along the way, and COVID certainly didn't help. And but then followed by an actor's stroke, and then I got to make a film, which is more than can be said for a lot of people in my industry. And so I count myself lucky to even had that shot at one, let alone maybe looking at others.
Well, I was born in Sydney. You're in Sydney. Is that where you plan on making your next movie, or can you give me any updates on what's coming up for you?
Yeah, I got a few sort of things in the works. There's actually a script that I wrote. I wrote for a friend of mine who's a director, so that would be I wouldn't be directing. And they're hoping to shoot that in Ireland, which is great. It's kind of where I wrote it to be set, and it's a very talented film crews over there. And then I have some other screenplays of my own, one including Shift, which was based on a short film that I wrote and directed, and that sort of works well as a proof of concept for the feature-length version.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be very happy to shoot anything and everything in Sydney, but from someone who comes from a design background, I'm also very happy to travel to locations that suit and take advantage of the real world as well. Says the guy who made a film almost 95% inside a studio. Sure.
Yeah, but it's a good film. You got a good cast, and the poster. You can get it on physical media. It's also going to be streaming.
Yep.
What did you decide on that one poster of Sasha, or was there a few designs in the mix?
I don't want to upset the Lionsgate gods, but that the poster and the trailer and the marketing plan was entirely theirs.
Okay.
I may have photoshopped my own poster and cut my own trailer, but
Okay.
those things will never see the light of day.
Well, on the special edition, Blu-ray down the track, you
That's
never
right.
know. Well, any final words? Like, why should people watch Latency? It's a tough world out there with indie films and scrolling through streaming services and so forth. What can you say that you can convince people to watch your movie other than me saying it's good and it's different and well acted? You're the director. I'll give you the final word.
I think it's the sort of film you want to watch if you want to actually pay attention to a film. It's not something you put on in the background while you make your dinner.
Right.
In fact, it might put you off your dinner if I've done the job. And I think it's good to encourage, I think, up and coming filmmakers to make what I would call a mixed genre film. It's not sci-fi as such. It's not
Yeah.
horror as such. It's a bit of a mishmash of the two. And ultimately, it's a psychological thriller. It's about what's going on in her mind, not so much about the tech. So, if you like a film that's going to challenge you, then I'd like to think this is the one that's going to make you think.
And there's a very patient courier. He's willing to leave his instrument there to be signed and him walk off. Not many
That's right.
couriers would do that. They would be the parcel and going.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that was he's ultimately that character deep down inside he's a nice man, and he wants to be kind even though he presents gruff on the outside.
Was it a rain machine on the roof or was it digital water?
Rain
Okay, cool.
Rain machine, yeah.
You can never, it's very hard to tell these days whether it's real water or real fur on an animal and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, Sasha very much got drenched, and so did most of the crew on that day. It was quite nice actually because like Bangkok is a hot city to work in, so it was quite nice when we had the rain machines going just to cool us all off.